Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Welcome everyone to the Touch MBA podcast. This is your host, Darren, and I'm super excited to have our next guest on the show, Miss Megan Overbay, who's the Director of Admissions for Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. And Megan has worked for Duke for over 8 years, the last 3 as the admissions director for their suite of MBA programs. And Megan also graduated from the daytime MBA program back in 2003. So I'm sure she'll have a lot of unique insight to share with our audience about what makes the Duke culture so unique. We hear about it all the time. Welcome to the show, Megan.
Thanks so much, Darren. It's great to be here.
Let's get straight into it. And what makes the Duke MBA unique from the other top-ranked programs in the U.S.?
There's probably a laundry list I could go off with, but I'll start with some of the 3 core things. We only have so much time. I'll start with why I chose to go to Duke and why I chose to come back and work here. And it's because this is a school that's incredibly innovative and is constantly figuring out how it can better itself. And for me, it was very important to be a part of a school that's going places and that doesn't rest on its laurels. And we've done that by developing a whole portfolio of programs. We have a program basically that will help you to achieve your goals in business and business education, whether you've just graduated from undergrad or you're a seasoned executive. We have any number of different formats that will make those programs work for your work situation and your life situation. We've also, I'm sure you're probably familiar with this, in the 2007-2008 timeframe, we actually launched a major global initiative so that we would be embedded and connected in all of the major market-defining economies of the world. And so you find that we have a presence in Europe, in Russia, in India, in China, and in the Middle East, as well as working on a number of things that are in Latin America and Africa. And it's very important for us because the world is changing, and what business leaders are needed to do in the world right now has changed drastically. And it's increasingly global, it's increasingly interdependent, and interdisciplinary. And so we need to make sure that we're providing an education and a community and an experience that allows people to be prepared to be business leaders in the world of today. And so that's what's led to our development of our programs. It's what has led to our global initiative. And it's also really at the core of our culture. We talk a lot at Duke about something called leaders of consequence. And it is our aim to identify and cultivate leaders of consequence. And what that means is people who are not only incredibly smart and talented and have the skills to be able to do what they need to do in the business world, but also people who have an incredibly strong character and sense of integrity and ethics, as well as a sense of purpose. And they really want to make the places that they live and work better because they were there. And so we strive to identify those people in admissions and to help to develop them as they go through our programs, and then they make us proud, obviously, as alumni. And that's really a core part of our community, are those people that really connect and give back to the places that they live and work.
We often hear so much about Duke's unique culture, that it's a really collaborative culture, but could you just explain a little bit more about what makes the student community so unique at Duke?
So interesting because it's one of the most difficult things to describe in words. We've been trying to figure it out for years and years, and I think it's one of those things where we hope that you can actually experience it by meeting people who are students of the program, people who have gone through the program, as well as ideally coming to campus at one point or another during the process of applying, if you're able to, and if not, utilizing those different representatives that we have all over the world, because it really is difficult it's kind of a feeling, and then you understand it as you see examples. But when you speak about it, it kind of always seems to sound the same. We actually are just about to launch a brand new website for our daytime MBA program where we've really tried to capture the culture, and it actually uses 36 different characteristics. And we feature student stories with each of those different characteristics to help exemplify what makes the culture special. So I'm very excited, especially for students who are not able to come to visit our campus and may not have the opportunity to connect as easily with people, to be able to utilize the website to learn about the people that make up our community. It's incredibly diverse. They're coming from all ends of the world, coming from all different backgrounds. And really what brings them together here is the sense that, I guess a few things. One is this idea that they're incredibly talented and smart, but very humble. And so when you come here, there's this idea that you are expected to teach as much as you learn. And so it's not just a professor teaching you. You're not just learning from them. You're really learning from your classmates. And there's going to be an area where, based on your background, you're incredibly strong. And we want you to take the time to teach someone else so that they can learn from what comes easily to you. And then you also need to have the humility to know that you don't know everything and that someone else can teach you and help you learn something that might be more challenging for you. And so that is very much the culture here, as is this concept of, if you take the time to help someone else, then you raise the bar for all Fuquans. And basically, everyone's going to graduate with a Duke MBA. And so it's very important to us that expectation for a Duke MBA is very, very high, and that we're all helping each other achieve it. And so you'll find that if somebody comes, an example that's given is, if somebody comes out of an interview and they felt like they maybe didn't put their best foot forward, they'll turn around and tell their classmate how they can better prepare, so that the interviewer's perception of Fuqua is that we're a very strong, great group of people and people that they would want to hire. They want the impression of the interviewer to be very high for Duke. And so even though it might not necessarily help that one individual, they want to help raise the level for everyone else. And so I think that is sort of at the core of who we are. And then you find that the people that we're bringing in are incredibly, incredibly passionate. They really want to get involved. This is not just a classroom experience. And especially with the daytime program or MMS program, where you're actually having a very significant campus-based experience, most people are not from Durham. They're coming from all over the world, all over the country, in all different areas. And they're oftentimes bringing their significant others with them and families. And people don't have pre-existing communities here. They don't already know other people that they go out with over the weekend. And so when you come here, it's a 24/7 experience. It's very intense. This is, and if you want 100% of your experience to be wrapped around the school and this community, then this is a great fit for you, because it really is that. And you really will get to know your class of over 400 people for the daytime program, because you're going to spend 2 years pretty intensely engaged with them, both in the classroom and in teamwork, but also in all of the clubs and activities that people do outside of the classroom. And we really expect people to get involved in whatever they're passionate about. We want you to lead. We want you to practice being a leader by doing it. And we give people every opportunity to do that in our community.
Wow, it sounds like just a great place for, transplant students, which seems to be a lot of, your student makeup.
Pretty much everybody.
Yeah, pretty much everyone to come and really live and breathe the business school experience and to have that sort of supportive environment.
Exactly.
Sounds great. So are there any new exciting developments this year?
Darren, there are always new and exciting developments. That's part of what I like about it. I was actually just involved this year in one thing that we're very proud of, which is called it's a little bit of a mouthful. It's the Fuqua Client Consulting Practicum, but it's also abbreviated, and of course in an acronym, which is FCCP. And what that is also tied to our global ambitions, which is we're trying to get our students out into real world experiences, consulting experiences, so that they can get exposure to maybe a new industry for them, or maybe one that they've come from before, or a new region of the world, and also get some consulting experience on their resume. And so what we do is we actually focus on both the U.S., because for many people that's actually a different region for them, and also China and Latin America, specifically Brazil and South Africa. And we have developed a suite of different relationships with companies, and we're continuing to grow that group from anything from big multinational companies to very small local nonprofits, because our students have interest in working in all of those different areas. And the industries range from, working in with a chemical company or an energy company to working with a hospital or something along those lines. And so it really pretty much runs the gamut what people could pursue in terms of a project. And so what we do is the students will get assigned a project and work with that company over a period of time while they're here in Durham. And then they'll spend time during their break in the spring actually going to that country or location of the company, working hands-on with them for 2 weeks and delivering a final project. So those are a great way of getting both experiential hands-on learning and also getting a more global exposure for our students. So that is something that we just launched this year. We actually had a number of different programs that were focused on different industries in the past, and we put them all under one umbrella. So we've been doing something like this in different ways for a while, but we haven't had it all under one umbrella with a lot of support around developing consulting skills for our students and ensuring that they had a really robust suite of project options.
And that takes place in the first year or the second year?
You could do it in either. More of our students have been doing it in the first year. I think just because it's a great way to be a resume builder, it gives you exposure to companies. We've had students that have gotten hired by the companies, obviously, that they did these projects with. And so I think it's more often used by first years, but both first and second years are welcome to participate.
So speaking of the first year, I noticed that the curriculum, allows for more flexibility than most similar programs in that the first year students basically take, and correct me if I'm wrong, all their 10 core classes in the fall term of their first year, and to allow them to take more electives, in their spring term in the first year to, prepare them for, internships they might like to seek out over the summer. Is that correct?
Yeah, they have one core course that remains in the spring. However, many students might pass out of one of their classes. They can exempt out of classes based on either prior schoolwork or exposure during their jobs. If you're a CPA, for example, you would pass out of our accounting class. And so many students are actually finished by the time they get there. So most of your spring terms, and we're on a quarter system. So because of that, you're also able to take many more electives, to your point. So in the 2 spring terms, they're able to take a number of different electives. Students usually take 3 to 4 classes per term. And so with just one in the spring, that's quite a few classes that they can take. And we have found from both our students and also our recruiters have loved this model because students really do come in both to the interview process for internships as well as coming into their summer. They have more exposure to the field in which they might be interning. And so they tend to do better in their interviews, and then they also are able to really hit the ground running in their internships, and the recruiters really appreciate that.
It must be a really intense fall term. I can only imagine.
It is. We start a little bit earlier than most of the schools do. We start, for our international students, many of them arrive in July for our language institute that it helps them to adapt to the culture of an American classroom and get sort of settled in Durham before they get started. But then the whole program starts in the beginning of August with our Global Institute, and that's actually a 3-week preterm. And it is also quite intense, but it's a very discussion-based set of courses. One is leadership, ethics, and organizations, and the other is global institutes and organizations. And basically, those 2 programs are based on helping you learn from the incredible diversity that is in the classroom and to really understand what is going on in the world of business today and why does that matter before you start talking about marketing or finance or accounting, really understanding the global context for what you're about to embark upon in your MBA experience. And so it does help students sort of reacclimate to a classroom when they probably haven't been in one in a while and get used to the pace of the curriculum at Fuqua. And it is fast-paced, and it's intentionally very fast-paced because, to be honest, when you're out in the working world, it's not as though you have a semester to learn something. You're typically going to start on something, and people expect you to know it next week, if not tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about the types of students that are attracted to Duke and that you guys attract, but oftentimes, the faculty is such an important part of the MBA experience. And I saw one stat on your site that your faculty was ranked #1 in the world by Bloomberg Businessweek for intellectual capital.
Yes, and we have been 3 times, the last 3 times that they've published it.
Wow. So, are there any particular academic areas that Duke is very well known for in terms of that intellectual capital?
That's actually one of the things I think we're most proud of is that we actually have strength across all disciplines. Certainly you can point to specific people who might be professors that are better known out in the general public because the research that they do gets more press. But I think that you get the intellectual capital rating because you have more faculty producing more things published in journals around the world. And I think that speaks to the fact that we have strength across all of our faculty dimensions. And that's another one of the reasons why a lot of students actually choose Duke, is because very few people have just a linear career path and only have one sense of they're only going to work in finance and they're going to work in finance for the rest of their lives. They probably have an interest in actually transitioning from that into something different, or they want either a broader scope of a role as they move forward. And it's really important because you're unlikely to go back to school again for you to take your MBA experience to be able to learn and prepare for your first career as well as the one after that and the one after that. And so for students coming in, it's important to make sure that we have multiple disciplines that we're very strong in and really can provide a broad-based general management education. The other thing that it's honestly nice for is many, many, many people come in thinking that they want to do one thing, and they set foot in the classroom and they sit down next to somebody and they say, oh, wow, I didn't even know you could do that. And they now have this whole new vision for different career options that as they're exposed to their classmates, and it totally transitions their plan for what they want to do. And we expect that to happen. It's a very natural part of this process. And in doing that, it's really important that you pick a school where they're good at everything, or else you might end up finding that what you're now passionate about doing is not something that you are necessarily the best place to learn. So we're proud of the fact that we can provide that regardless of what you choose to be interested in.
And why should candidates get their MBA in Durham and in North Carolina, of all places? I'm based in Vietnam, and a lot of Vietnamese candidates are thinking about the big cities, LA, New York. So, yeah, why an MBA in North Carolina?
It's interesting. Just one little sidebar. I actually went to Vietnam on one of our GATE trips, our global academic travel experiences, as a student, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Vietnam because I loved it.
Yeah.
Which is Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and it was amazing. So in any case, as far as Durham, I'm very, very biased. I've actually lived, I think, in 14 or 15 different cities and in 3 different countries, and I've traveled to over 40 countries, Vietnam obviously being one of them. And so I've seen a lot of the world, and I really know what matters to me. And I think that a lot of those things are things that really resonate with people as they're applying to Duke. So we are a part of a sort of broader metropolitan area that's called the Triangle. So there's Durham, Chapel Hill, and Raleigh. And the 3 together actually make up a fairly large metropolitan area. But when you're in Durham, it'll feel like it's a smaller town because it's a part of it has sort of a central core. And that part isn't huge, whereas the metropolitan area is quite a bit larger. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the country. It's been rated by several different organizations as one of the best places to live and work in the country and in the world. And it has an incredible diversity of people that have been brought here because each of those cities that I mentioned have a major university tied to them. So there's a huge influx of just talent and interesting people from around the world. And then in the middle of it, we have a really big entrepreneurial focus. And there's a lot of different companies that have based themselves here, both big and some of these smaller startups. And that also attracts a lot of talent. And so I believe we still have one of the highest MD and PhD rates per capita of anywhere in the U.S. And so you'll find that it's a very highly educated area. It's a very diverse area. And what that brings is a lot of arts and culture and different things to do that you might not expect from a smaller city. So we have some amazing museums. There's a huge foodie culture here. Some of the top award winners in the food world for restaurants and chefs are actually based in this area. There's an amazing performing arts center that has started in Durham, as well as a huge sports culture, obviously. So for people who happen to be basketball fans, it's hard not to know Duke. And we also have national championship teams in several other areas: lacrosse, soccer, and tennis in the last several years have all won national championships. And so there's huge college rivalries, but we also have major and minor league sports teams that are based in this area. So there's really quite a lot to do for an area that, because it is still a smaller metropolitan area, we really do have a lower cost of living. There's very, very little, if any, traffic, especially around Durham, and we have fabulous weather. So it's not such a bad place to be. It's pretty amazing.
It sounds like a college community.
Yes.
An intimate college community, but that's closely tied into these big research cities as well.
Exactly. That's a great way of describing it, Darren.
So what type of candidates? Okay, so you mentioned Duke's different type of business education programs. If we could focus on two of them, which are, the daytime MBA and the cross-continent MBA, could you sort of explain the difference between these two programs?
Absolutely. They're actually, from a demographic perspective, very similar. It is generally people that are earlier in their careers. They've really gotten a great start. They might have between 3 to 6 or 7 years of work experience, and they're looking to invest in that next big step in their career through, furthering their education with an MBA. So they're very similar in that regard. Where they start to differ has to do with their desire to leave the workforce. And some students would prefer actually to stay on their current job path. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to change careers in the near or long-term future. It just means that they don't want to stop working to get an MBA. And then some we have a number of different global experiences that you can pursue, obviously, through our daytime MBA program, but our cross-continent program is inherently very international. And so for students who are really interested in having a very, very immersive international experience as a part of their program, they might also transition over to the cross-continent program because that might be a better fit for their career goals. So if you don't mind, I'll take just a minute to describe the format of cross-continent.
Yeah.
So understand how that's different from daytime and why that might change the interest in it for certain students. So the cross-continent program is actually a program where you basically come together for what we call residencies. And you start in Durham and you'll do an orientation as well as kick off your first term of classes. And you spend about 2 weeks here in Durham with all of your classmates who come from around the world. And then you will return home to wherever home is or wherever your work project might be based. And then you utilize our distance learning platform, which is actually just overhauled last year. And it's an incredible, very interactive, collaborative way of learning through a distance format. And you'll complete your courses in that way. Then you'll have a brief break, and you'll do that for about 2 months. And then you'll have a brief break, and then you'll start your next residency. And your next residency will be in China. And then you'll do a residency in Dubai and India and Russia, and then you'll return to Durham. I may not have done those in the right order, but in general, those are the cities that you cover. So what happens during those programs is that you'll, of course, have your core courses and things like accounting and finance and marketing and strategy, just like you would in any of our other programs. But you'll also have these what we call spinal courses that roll through all of your different terms that you're in the program. And so basically, one of them is called Culture, Civilizations, and Leadership. And what that does is takes advantage of the fact that you are actually learning and immersed in these different places that you're doing residencies. And so we really intend to get you out there to help you understand what is it like to live and work in this culture, and why is that different from the last place that you were. And it helps you to build sort of a framework and a construct for how culture and organizations that are existing in different places in the world influence the way business is done. And so when you walk into some place, whether you've been there through your program or not, you'll be able to sit down and say, I can make sense of the business environment here based on my understanding of the way that organizations were set up, the way that the culture has influenced business, how much of a role government has in this, and so on. And it really helps you to be a much more fluent global business person. And so for students who want a very, very global career and students who are interested in continuing to work during their program, you can live and work anywhere in the world. It can change. You can get a promotion or a new opportunity and completely move to the other side of the world and still complete the program. So it's a fabulous fit for that group of people.
So that's 2 weeks in Durham, 2 weeks in Shanghai, 2 weeks in Dubai, 2 weeks in New Delhi, 2 weeks in St. Petersburg, and then 2 weeks back in Durham again. So these candidates, if they're working, I mean, they have to have a pretty good relationship with their employers, right?
They do, and it certainly works well for certain students. And just to clarify, some of the residencies are a bit shorter than that. Most of them are about 10 days, but the first one, the kickoff one, is 2 weeks, and the final one is an elective term, and that is longer as well. But many students extend it anyway because they prefer to also be able to explore a little bit in the region around that area, and so you'll often find that they're tacking on trips as well. But yeah, in any case, it does not work for all job types and all careers. It really depends on a good relationship with the student as well as the employer, and that employer does need to value that this global experience that the student is going to have and bring back to them will have an impact right away. And that's part of what we help them do. We do a lot of counseling with our students that apply to the cross-continent program to help them figure out if this is a fit for them and to help guide them through the application process. And part of that is because it really is an important conversation that you're going to have with your employer to help them understand the value of this and to ensure that they'll support you as you go through it. Some of our students will use some of their vacation time, but you're correct. It's quite a bit of time, and so really, there's going to be time that your employer needs to support as well to allow you to be out of the office. But especially for people who do project-based work, it tends to work out quite well. And in terms of total time out of the office, it's actually not really different from a typical weekend executive program where you would go to do an MBA and every other weekend you would spend a Friday there. It's just that they're clustered together. The days are clustered together in a different format.
And what is the class size?
It varies. It's usually somewhere between 120 and 160 students.
120 to 160. Okay, wow. Okay, great. So I'll be sure to link to the proper contact or website where students, or candidates, I should say, who are interested in the cross-continent or CC program can get in touch with you for that sort of pre-assessment of where they stand.
That would be wonderful. Please do.
Great. So if we can now talk a bit more about admissions. So we've heard about, what makes Duke unique, but what type of candidate are you looking for?
So when we had talked about a leader of consequence before, the person who's incredibly smart, competent, has strong character, and a sense of purpose, and their desire to make an impact in the world and to really make a difference, that is what we're looking for.
I think that a lot of candidates might feel they have those characteristics, from their educational or work background. But what 3 things do you think applicants can do to improve their chances of admissions?
I would say there are 3 things, but they are actually kind of a sequence of activities. Applying to get an MBA, I believe, and we believe, it's a process of self-reflection. And what is really important to do before you start it is to step back and really do some thinking about who you are and why you want to do this, why you think that this investment of your time and energy and money is going to be of value to you personally, and how you want it to grow and change you, and really understand the environments in which you flourish and what helps you grow and push yourself out of your comfort zone and learn what types of people and environments you really enjoy being in and that make you happy. Because I think one of the things that I see all of the time is that people apply to schools based on any number. Maybe they have an area of interest that matches theirs, or a ranking, or whatever it is that they might use to help them decide. And then they try really, really hard to prove to that school that they're a good fit for them. Ultimately, they don't really think until they get to the very end of the process about whether or not that school is actually a good fit for them. Like, they spend most of their time trying to prove to the school that they're good enough for it, instead of saying, is this school right for me? And you can't say if a school is right for you if you don't actually know who you are. And if you take that time and self-reflection and really figure that out, and then you start to do the second step, which is really research schools and obviously go through all of the resources that are available online, but then ask schools. At least at Duke, we will connect you with people. We'll connect you with current students. We want you to talk to our alumni. We want you to get as exposed as you can to our school to figure out if it really is a good fit for what you now know of yourself. And then based on that, when you apply, you're actually going to do part 3 of it really, really well, because you should have a better sense of self. You should have a really clear sense of why we are a school that you chose to apply to. And if you're able to convey that in a lot of detail in your application, you tend to do much better. Because most people who apply to Duke are qualified in terms of their academic background and their work experience. They're technically qualified. The real differentiators come in the people that are going to be a great fit for our community, and really are going to be those future leaders of consequence, and will love being in the environment that we described in Durham, and will want to get engaged outside of the classroom and are passionate about that. We want to find those specific people, not just the people who are technically qualified to go here. And I think that most of our peer schools feel the same way. They have something that makes them special and unique, and they're looking for the students that really resonate with that. And so it's the homework that you do about yourself and the schools on the front end that really position you to be a much stronger candidate once you apply.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And candidates need to really start this self introspection process and research process many months in advance.
Yeah, agreed.
To make sure they really select great fit schools for them. And I saw that one Fuqua alumni wrote that he was giving advice to other prospective candidates, and he wrote, make sure you love the community of the MBA you're going to be a part of. Well, what is the best way, as you said, for candidates to contact Duke students and alumni to get a sense of that community?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on where you live, in terms of some of it's just going to come right to you if you happen to live in a place where we come to visit, because if we do, then we bring our alumni, and if current students are in the area at the time, we'll bring them to our sessions. If we can, we often do Skype sessions actually, and we'll have our current students from that area actually participate in an event that we do via Skype, via video Skype, so that they can really say, this is what the student experience is, and this is what I'm going through, and I understand where you came from because I just came from there, and this is what I learned about Duke by being here. And I think that's really an important part of our process, is we do our best to try to bring it to people. So if we do come to your area, then that's obviously it's gonna be a lot easier. However, if we don't, and I wish we could visit every corner of the earth, but we can't. And so if we don't, then we would love to have you email us and tell us where you are and what you're interested in doing. And if we can, we of course want to connect you with somebody that is either in our current classes or an alum that can connect with you on whatever it is. Maybe it's where you come from, or your industry that you're interested in going into, or the industry you're working in now. We love to be able to connect our current students and alumni with prospective students so that they can learn more about the program.
Great. And they should do that by writing to your admissions office email?
Yep.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. So I'll be sure to link to that as well in the show notes. So in terms of...
And actually, Darren, can I add one more thing to that?
Yes.
I just thought of one other important thing. Our website, like I mentioned, is going to be much more robust. It will have lots of profiles of current students. So I think that's going to be another great way to really dig through those profiles. But we also have a student blog for the daytime program, and we're starting one, I think, in the next year for our cross-continent program. And those are great ways to real-time understand this is what students are going through, and this is what the experience would be like if I were also on campus.
Got it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. We look forward to the new site for sure. And in terms of your admissions deadlines, I noticed that you have 4 deadlines. And in your brochure, you mentioned that those students seeking scholarships and international students should apply in the earlier rounds if possible. And so I guess my question was, do candidates have a better chance if they apply in your early action round, for example, than in the 4th round?
It depends on if their application is ready. I think that we will always say that you should apply as early as you can in the cycle, as long as your application is the very best application that you can put forward. And so you need to make that decision first. And if you're not ready earlier in the year, that's fine. A lot of people ask us, is there a big difference between round 1 versus round 2? And there really isn't. We literally look at who comes through. We're picking the very best people out of that are the right fit for our culture. And there are still many spots that are left over for round 2. Early action is special in the sense that it happens very early in the year. So going back to that whole self-reflection process, you have to probably have been doing that and preparing and getting your GMAT test ready and all of those things fairly far in advance for you to be ready to apply for that. And you should also know that without any question, Duke is your top choice, that you would drop any other school to come to Duke. And that's a small group of people. And if that is correct for you, you should absolutely apply. If not, it really is binding and you really shouldn't apply. And it's not a disadvantage for you to apply in round 1. What early action does is allows us to give you a very early response because of the fact that you know that Duke's the right fit. So you don't have to apply to other schools. You'll hear from us before most schools' deadlines even come around. And that means that you can plan for next year and be done with it. And we love to have people that are committed early and to have our class started early. And it's a great way for us to also help build the community that others who are admitted later will have a sense for who are these people that are going to be my classmates. And so we think it's a win-win for both sides, which is why we do the early action, but it's really not for everyone. And it's just a question of whether you're both ready and clear on the fact that Duke is the top choice for you that early in the cycle. And that's sort of the advantage to applying in early action. It's not as though you have a better chance of getting in. It's just that you have an earlier decision process.
And your admissions process involves interviews as well?
It does. If people are able to come to campus to interview, then we have an open interview period at the very beginning of the year. Obviously, for many people, that will not be an option. And after that period, that is fine. All of our interviews from that point on are done by invitation only, and the vast majority of our applicants go through that process. And so basically what we do is we actually will read and evaluate your file. We'll do one read on your file. You then have a committee that meets to discuss all of the applicants and then decides who we'll invite to interview. And then the interview decisions go out, and then your application will get read again. Your interview will be considered in that process, and then there'll be another committee that discusses you again to determine your admission decision.
Got it. And those interviews are held by Duke admission staff or alumni or students?
It depends on the program. And actually, so does the last part that I was talking about. That was all the daytime admissions process. So for that program, actually, admissions rarely interviews people. In most cases, you'll be interviewed by either our alumni, or if you come to campus, by one of our second-year students who is trained to be what we call an admissions fellow. It's one of the many leadership roles that you can take at the school. And the reason that we have the alumni and the current students do most of the interviews is because of the fact that they really know best who will be a good fit in the classroom in this very moment, and who they would want to have on their team, who we would put in front of a recruiter that we would be proud to have as one of our students and proud to have as an alum. And it's their role in the process to give us that insight, because of the community is so important to us. And so that is usually who would be doing the vast majority of our interviews for daytime.
In terms of the GMAT, does Duke have a minimum score that candidates need to get to apply?
We do not. We have found that the GMAT is an important part of the process. It's one of the few things that you have that's consistent across all applicants. It varies drastically by region, however, and gender and any number of other factors. In terms of education systems and what someone has been exposed to, they might be more or less likely to do well on the GMAT. And so we need to take all of that into account when we look at it. We found that people that have lower GMATs are exceptional students and incredible members of our community, and there are people that have very high GMATs that really just aren't a fit for our program.
Yeah, so I think that's a hint to those of you who are listening. If you have a lower GMAT and you're not able to bring that score up, really show, how you can contribute to the Duke community and be a part of this culture, but also show, that you're academically able to get through the program, whether that's hopefully through a higher GPA in college or whatever other means, right? Do I kind of get that point from you there?
Yeah, I think it is one factor that we look at, and we're going to, exactly what you said, we're going to look at it in conjunction with your either undergraduate or any postgraduate courses that you have taken, as well as work experience. So you may well have been working in a field that is tied to finance or accounting or any number of the courses that we would have here. And in doing that, you may have had great experiences directly applicable to the classroom, and shows us that you might be able to be more successful there. As you mentioned earlier, it's a really fast-paced program, and it's important that we make sure that we admit people that will be able to be successful in that and be able to keep up. You really do have to have that mental horsepower to be able to keep up, but the GMAT's not the only thing that can tell us that.
Okay, so now if we could talk about financing the MBA, what percentage of, maybe we could start with the Duke Daytime MBA. What percentage of your class gets scholarships, and what are your average scholarship amounts?
Yeah, it's about a quarter to a third of our incoming daytime students will get some form of scholarship. It's anywhere between $5,000 and a full tuition scholarship. And obviously there are more of the smaller amounts than there are of the larger amounts, but we have a mix of all of those. And we don't have any sort of a separate application process for scholarships at Duke. We actually consider your scholarship at the same time as we consider you for admission. And really, it's the overall strength of your application. And the stronger your application is overall, the more that we feel that you'll have an impact in our community and beyond, the more likely you are to get a scholarship.
Right. And so those are merit-based scholarships, right?
That's correct.
Of course, the first thing they have to do is, really want to go to Duke and show that they're a good fit, get into the program. But how can they improve their chances of perhaps winning a larger share of that scholarship funding?
There really isn't anything different than what they would do to be able to apply for the program overall. Look at each one of the subcomponents and figure out how to put your best foot forward. Certainly, we do value things like, community impact, like I had mentioned before. And so being really involved in things that you're passionate about is something that can often differentiate applicants in addition to their academic background, their successes at work from a really true, qualitative aspect, the strength of your recommendations, ensuring that you prepare your recommenders and they can really help you to demonstrate how you've made a significant impact on the company or companies where you've worked. And, essays and interviews really allow people to come to life. It's truly the whole package.
Got it. And what loan options are available, especially for international students?
We actually have one of the few loan programs that is available to our students through Duke's Coastal Federal Credit Union loan. It's for our international students. It does not require a U.S.-based cosigner, and it really has quite competitive rates and terms. There's information about it on our website, but we really are committed to helping those students that we admit to making it possible for them to be able to fund their education. And so that is an option for them as well. Certainly, in every case, it's important to compare that loan with any other options that you might have. If you do happen to have family members or someone who could co-sign a U.S.-based loan, that's another option. And some people, the funding options in their own countries are actually quite strong and might be a better option for them as well.
Well, that's still a great option to have. So international students can, if they get a family member to co-sign the loan, they can get loans from U.S. banks?
If you have a U.S.-based person. So U.S. banks typically require a U.S.-based cosigner. And it's just if you happen to have someone who is and who would act as a cosigner for you, then there are certainly U.S.-based banks that could potentially give you an education loan.
Great. Wow, what an opportunity. So now let's talk about careers. So everyone's concerned about getting a great job, after they get their MBA. So what can you say? Because I noticed that roughly 40% of your student population is international, which is quite high for a U.S. program. I mean, what can you say to those international applicants who are concerned about getting jobs, after graduating from Duke?
Yeah, I actually connected with our career management center so that I could get as up to date specifics as possible on that. And about 13 to 17% of our daytime MBA student population accepts employment outside the U.S. immediately after graduation. And so what that actually means is that about 83 to 87% of the entire class accepts a first position here in the U.S. And so for our international students, that actually translates in somewhere between 80 to 90% of those without permanent work authorization in the U.S. actually secure positions here. And so it's actually quite a good opportunity here. With that said, a lot of that has to do with students really taking the initiative. I don't think we would ever say that is an easy path. Certainly with the visa constraints that we have in this country, there's a lot that can sort of make that a more challenging path for people. And so our Career Management Center works closely with students from the moment they come on campus. They actually have one of the leadership communications courses that you take in the first half of your first year. It's focused on helping to prepare you for your job search, putting things together so you can put your best foot forward, and really building a strategy to make sure that you understand how to best approach it. And for our international students who would like to work in the U.S., it is going to mean a lot more energy and effort dedicated to your job search than you might have if you already have authorization to work here, for sure. What we've also found is that a number of our international students are actually starting to decide to return home to their countries. They would prefer to do that because the opportunities in their countries are actually significantly better than what they might find here. So I think that that's also something that we're seeing as an increasing trend, is that many people are actually interested either in returning home or in pursuing other international opportunities where, the sort of career trajectory might be a little bit steeper.
Does Duke MBA have a bunch of offices? Because I know you mentioned you guys are pushing you have this international push. So for candidates who are looking for jobs in China or India or wherever that may be, how does that work?
Yeah, you're correct. We actually have people on the ground in our regional offices and all of our locations around the world, and they really are incredibly helpful in building connections with companies and organizations in those areas. They build these amazing boards of directors for each of our regions. And that board is helpful in us understanding what are the major companies and organizations that are influencing this region, and how do we develop relationships with them that will both help us in a couple of ways. One is obviously in the career process for students across all of our programs, helping to identify new job opportunities for them, but also in looking at how they can facilitate really strong immersive residencies for the cross-continent program as well as our global executive program. And so it's important for us to have people on the ground so that they're really in touch with the community for both of those reasons.
And how long can international students stay in the U.S. After they graduate to look for jobs?
Yeah, if they go through one of our full-time residential programs, meaning either the Master of Management Studies program or the daytime MBA program, then they have up to a year of what we call OPT here, where they're able to actually stay and work in the U.S. without an H-1B visa.
I see. And do they have to apply for that?
That is a good question. I don't know. They get it, but they might have to go through an application process to have that happen. It's not as though I'm sure there could be an application, but it's not as though that's a barrier.
Because, I saw some pretty amazing stats on your last career placement report for the class of 2012, and that, let's see here, 80% of jobs that were found were Fuqua facilitated. One question I have for you, how exactly does your career services team help with that?
Yeah.
And the second is that 90% of that class secured jobs within 3 months of graduation, and that includes international students. And I love that your career placement report actually separates that stat for U.S. and international students. But yeah, if you could sort of highlight, 1 to 2 ways your career services assists proactive students find jobs.
So I had mentioned the course that they run to help people prepare. Career coaches are also available on demand every single day during the academic year. And our CMC staff members both organize and attend all of our employer recruiting events so that they can really make sure that they're there, connected with the companies, connected with the students, and able to answer questions in real time. The actual center is arranged by sector, and so we have teams of people that are focused on all major sectors that our students are interested in pursuing. And so they really are experts in the employers in that area, what it takes to put together a resume and prepare for interviews and a career search in order to be successful in that field. And they really help to guide and support our students as they pursue those paths.
Yeah, and so as a former MBA student yourself, when you were looking for jobs, in 2003, I'm sure you reached out to a lot of alumni to learn about different opportunities. What is the response like that students get, from the Duke alumni community?
I'm so glad you asked that, because that is actually another one of the things that I really think that differentiates Duke. We're a young school. We're actually the youngest school in the top 10. So we don't have as big of an alumni base as you might look at from many of the older, more established schools. But we have an incredibly engaged alumni network. And when you contact them, they respond and they do their best to help you to learn more about the field that they're working in, to help consider options that you might have, to help you really put your best foot forward in the career search. And if there's an opportunity with their company, then they're going to be the first one to try to help you connect with it. And I really think that that's something that's very special. And I experienced that actually when I made a job transition to come back to Duke. and I've watched many other people experience it as well. Our alumni are exceptional.
Yeah, because, I think size and breadth is important, but that sense of belonging to the community, I think, is also a really important consideration for candidates, So not just that there's 40,000 or whatever the number is alums, but how responsive and engaged are they? So that's great to hear that the Duke MBA alumni are super engaged. And I think we've covered so much over the course of this podcast, but is there anything else about the Duke MBA that you just wish more candidates knew about?
Oh, good gracious.
Not enough time, huh?
I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that I do think we covered a lot of it. I think that this is a truly transformative experience And we are genuinely focused on identifying and cultivating the people that are going to really make an impact in the world. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be the person that you see on the cover of Fortune. We certainly hope that there are alumni that do that, but they might also just make a really notable change in their immediate community. And that's how we're going to make a difference in the world, is by people being at those intersections of business and key issues that are going on in the world today, and really trying to sort of chip away at it and make a really big difference. And I think that it's a very special community as a result of the fact that we attract the people that are interested in doing that, and that we're putting them out into the world with a very collaborative and sort of humble approach to making a difference. And I hope that people have a better understanding of that after having listened to this podcast, and hope that they'll, reach out to us and try to learn more through the various media that they have to do that.
Great. And I know that Duke has had an essay question last year, where you asked applicants to tell 25 facts about themselves. But so if I can turn the spotlight on you and put a little pressure on you, what 3, not 25, but 3 words would you use to describe the program?
Transformative. Immersive. We talked about the 24/7 experience. It is immersive. Regardless of which program you go through, it's going to be intense. And consequential.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan, for being on the show, and we look to have you on again soon.
Thank you, Darren. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number 1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.